The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Nicole Hennessy, Vice President of the Music Business Association. Welcome to the Common Ground webinar series. I'm excited to have Adam Mirabella back on the stage today for a presentation entitled Become a Future Leader in Entertainment. But before I turn the microphone over to Adam, definitely want to just update you on a few music biz happenings. For those of you interested in the annual conference, Music Biz 2019 in Nashville from the 5th through the 8th. Take a look at the website. Great program, very high level keynotes that many of which, like Zane Lowe and Paul Rosenberg, don't speak many places, and we're lucky and honored to have them on the program this year. Great award recipients, excuse me, including BB Rexa and Kane Brown. So check out the program. It's at musicbiz2019.com. The early bird registration deadline is March 22nd, so next Friday. That saves you $50 off of your ticket. So please do, get your early bird registrations in by the 22nd. Many more programs will be announced in the coming weeks and adding some speakers. So be checking back often to that schedule and see all the happenings. Again, musicbiz2019.com. We have one more webinar in this leadership series. It will be two more webinars in this series, April 4th and May 6th. So check the website, musicbiz.org, the events tab. Under the webinars, you'll see the two webinars that we have coming up that will round out this series. For those of you who will be in Nashville with us for the annual conference, that last webinar will be not only a webinar for those not in attendance, but those who are in attendance in Nashville can see that one live. So if you want to meet Adam and Alana, you can do so in Nashville. So again, check out the webinar section of musicbiz.org and register for those next two webinars. So Adam, welcome back. Great information on our last webinar. Highly inspiring and motivational for those who want to be leaders in the business, and excited to hear how we can become that good, positive leader in the business. So I'm going to mute myself. I'm going to be here monitoring the questions for you, and thank you again.
Okay, my pleasure. Well, welcome to the second in a four-part series about becoming a future leader in the entertainment business. This is sponsored by the Music Business Association, so we certainly appreciate them putting all the support in so we could get this program out to people in the industry. My name is Adam Mirabella, and I am a certified executive coach. I'm also president of Mirabella Leadership Advisors. But in addition to that, I've been in the music business for over 15 years, working on the label side at Warner and Sony, and also working on the retail side as well, international retail for Nokia, back before they were bought before Microsoft. So I've had a lot of insight and view into leadership in the music business, and that's why I put this program together. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to become better leaders in entertainment. My partner in creating this series is Ilana Zivkovic, and she is the CEO of Work. You can see her logo there on the bottom right. And Ilana is not going to be co-presenting with me today because she's got another program she's had to work on, but she did help me put this together, so I wanted to just acknowledge her contributions as well. So let's talk about today. Today is about branding and personal branding, but I wanted to really consider two things today. One is, what do you want to be? And then the second is, how do you want to be perceived while doing that thing? And I just thought that would be really important because, the crux of this dialogue today is around branding. How do you brand yourself, and how do you get yourself known for what you are, what you do, and what you stand for? But also, it's important to really think about what do you want to be first. So, what I wanted to let you know is that there'll be two Q&A sessions. The first part of this about really honing in on your real truth about what you want to be. It's only about 4 or 5 slides, and then there'll be a Q&A. So if you have questions on the first few slides I'm doing, please let Nicole know ahead of time, and then we'll stop in about 5 slides and do that Q&A, and then we'll go into the second piece of it. Okay. So when we look at the agenda, I don't read agendas. You can see all this, but you can see that, really what we're trying to do is really create for you the right image. And as I mentioned, there's 2 different parts to it, really standing in your own truth about what you want to do in your career. And I believe that that's a really important foundational building block, because you can start branding yourself, even if you're not quite in the right role. But as an executive coach, I would advise that you find how to get into the right role that really is meaningful for you, the one where you're meant to be and you just know that it's a perfect fit for what you want to do. And then you really start to brand yourself heavily. And the reason I say that is because you'll find that the branding part of it, really getting yourself out there as a brand, is a lot more effective if you're in the role that you're meant to be in. So, what do you want to be? It's an interesting question, and it's one that, when we think about transitions, you might not be where you want to be today. And if I take this to a music example, if you look at like the Beatles when they started, in the late 50s, John Lennon started. It was really a band. It was a band that did skiffle music, which was almost a kind of rockabilly kind of sound that was very popular in the UK in the 50s. And, if you think about the Beatles and their branding, that would have been really difficult for them to brand themselves in that way, because it wasn't really who they were meant to be. Then they finally got into, the pop rock and became one of the greatest rock bands of all time. But once they were in their real truth, that was when they were able to really own it and then start the branding. And of course, they were able to evolve their brand, which we'll talk about later. Another example might be, for instance, music side, Kid Rock, who started out just as a rapper, but then he started to infuse rock into the music that he was doing, so it became rap rock, and it was really perfect for him. And then his branding really took off. So an example inside of business, for our industry might be potentially somebody who's in the marketing department, and they really are passionate about PR, and they want to move from marketing to PR. And let's just say that, there's a separate PR department, that would be something they'd want to tackle first and then go on to brand themselves. Okay. So when you start thinking about what you want to be, and how you want that to come together, it's really about forward motion. Like, you really need to think about where you are today and then what you are looking to be. And the timeline around this is really a very personal one. So as a coach, I wouldn't say, 2 years out, 5 years out. It could be whatever's meaningful to you. So for instance, the example I just gave, moving from marketing to PR. Well, you might say to yourself, you know what? I really want to be in PR, and I'm giving myself a goal that I'm going to make a maneuver from this department to that department in the next year or 18 months. But I might have a long-term goal that I want to run a PR department in the entertainment business, within 10 years, right? But these are the kinds of things that, you need to kind of play with, and you need to dream a little bit. So the idea is, think about what you want to be moving forward. When do you want that to happen? And then what are the steps that you're going to need to get there? And I don't recommend that you do this sort of like sit down at lunch one time, get out of the office, and just knock it out in an hour. This is the kind of thing that you want to kind of play with. And like I said, you want to dream and sort of get your fantasize a little bit about how far you can take your career. And you want to kind of massage that over days or weeks. At some point you need to own it and figure out what it is. But you want to kind of play with this, and you want to let it breathe for a little while when you're envisioning what you want to be. And I'll use some examples during this about, how I was able to do that in my career. But another exercise you could use is just simply using the statement of thinking about the skill sets that you have. So this is an exercise we would do in coaching, for instance. You think about the skill sets that you have, and you say, what skills do I have? What are some of my most prominent things that I bring to the party? And then what would you like to happen with it? So you could create a statement, for instance, that says, I will, for instance, I'll use it for coaching for me. I will use my passion around developing others to create a coaching business where I'm going to have a full slate of clients within 5 years, right? So there's a mission and a vision around what I want to do with my coaching business. And it's very simple to do if you just think about the skill sets that you have and to what end do you want to use this skill set? So it's another exercise that you can use in addition to kind of just visualizing things. So once you kind of visualize and you have an idea what you want to do, this is an important part, is to sit down then and really assess how are you going to get there. And there's two pieces to this assessment. The first one is self-assessment, and you really want to think through, okay, this is my objective, this is what I'm trying to do. What are the things that I already have on my side around this goal that I have and this, place that I want to be in my career? And then what do you see as the obstacles or the opportunity areas? What are the things that you need to tackle, right? Using the early example. So for instance, somebody wants to, they're really passionate about PR, etc. Maybe they haven't had a lot of experience writing press releases, right? So that would be an opportunity to say, well, I need to get more experience writing press releases. So then you start to figure out what are the, what's the path to getting that done. It might be you have a friend in that department and you're going to let them kind of, work with you, sharing some of the press releases that are coming up. It might be, a leader inside of the company that's going to help you kind of massage that part of the business that you're trying to understand. Once you do your self-assessment on the pieces that you have of the puzzle already and the pieces you need to adapt to, then you go to an outside assessment. And this is a really great place to challenge yourself. As when you think about, nobody owns your career but yourself. You are the owner. So challenge yourself, because a career is so important, to your life and to what you feel you're getting out of life and giving, to this world. So you want to find the right place. And with the outside assessment, it's what we call in coaching, putting yourself on the line. And the reason it's putting yourself on the line is when you do an outside assessment, you're asking somebody else to all of a sudden have an understanding and even a little bit of a co-ownership in your goal, in your objective. And that's why it's putting you on the line, because most of the time, anybody, if you have a goal in mind, the second you share that goal with somebody close to you, you actually become much closer to achieving that goal. And the reason is that it's now come out of your mouth, and you don't want to let yourself down, but you also don't want to let that person down, and you want to feel like you've delivered on what you said you were going to do. So getting an outside assessment serves a very large purpose, which is putting you on the line to get this goal done. But the other piece, going back to, understanding the steps that you need to take, it's a nice place for you to really start building, getting a different idea on your strengths and your weaknesses from somebody outside of your own view, because sometimes our own view of ourselves is clouded. And the last piece about outside assessment, it's just sort of a natural evolution, is that, let's just say that, somebody went to a senior person inside their company and said, I know that you and I, worked together for the last 4 years. You have a pretty good sense of what I'm about. I'd love you to kind of assess my ability to move into this new realm that I'm trying to move into, right? What happens is the person offers that assessment. There's a dialogue that takes place. And many times it's a natural evolution where that trust and that interaction together leads to mentorship. And that's sort of that other person looking out for you, kind of keeping their eyes open for opportunities and really being on your side. So it's nothing you can force, but it does happen very often in a very natural way when you put yourself on the line and ask for an outside assessment. So after that, you need to just go be it, right? And for many people, you kind of visualize, you dream a little bit about where you want to go. Many people actually have a vision board. I use visualization all the time in my own goal setting, but I actually don't have a vision board. I have a lot of friends that do, and it helps them immensely. So you might want to sort of use images and put them in one place. That's what a vision board is, to really help you achieve this. And then you need to just start doing it, right? And if you don't want to do a vision board, as I said, I use visualization in a different way. For instance, I might use a picture that's inspiring me to get a certain goal done. Let's use the coaching example. Maybe I have a visual of, the word coach or something like that. So every time I open my drawer, I see that, and it sort of sparks something inside of me. So you don't have to be as formal as a vision board, but I'm certainly not against them. But there are all different ways that you can have visual. You can, send yourself something, delayed time to come in your email box, etc., things like that, with a visual that's going to move you to where you need to be. But you need to get started, and that's the main point. But how do you do that? That's really the question, right? So now you've got this kind of initiative. You're looking to move your career to a certain place. How are you going to do it? Well, first is, you can really ask to sit in and join other experiences that you don't have already. And for me, when I was in my career, I was in the sales department at a label, and I had seen this other thing, which was online retail. So it was before Amazon was selling CDs online, but there were other companies that were selling CDs online. And I thought, this is really interesting. They're kind of retailers. We should, our department should be seeing, managing this, or at least participating in it. And so what I did is I went to the web-based, the new media department, it was called back then, but the web department. And I asked them, like, what do you guys know about this? And they were like, oh man, we get hit up on this stuff all the time. This is a great place. If you want to sit in on some meetings, come sit in on some meetings, And I was like, oh great, let's do that, And all of a sudden it sort of really started to expand my horizons around this objective that I had. Then also try to set some time with people that have the knowledge that you're looking to get. And yes, this can be like a lunch, and people appreciate that, but sometimes, you need to be mindful. I'm going to talk about networking later as part of your branding. You need to be mindful that maybe people don't have that much time to give. So don't be afraid to just ask for 20 minutes. And I'm going to go through that a little bit later on how to really leverage, the networking piece, but really do ask for people to share knowledge with you. Most of the time, you'll find that they're definitely willing to do it. Even people that are very senior to you, if you ask appropriately, they're very happy to do that. Conferences are an amazing thing. So when you find something that that you want to do, go find the conferences that relate to that area of the business. And then if you need to, get the funding from, a manager or whatever, go ask for the funding and explain to them that it's going to be a payback, not only for you, but for the company. And I will give you a real life example of this. As I was starting to move from, my career into digital, I asked permission to go to 2 digital conferences a year. And what I found is the first 3 years, it was incredible. I was absorbing so much from these conferences, and I was able to start speaking to the way we might want to adapt our artists' marketing plan from a digital perspective because of this knowledge I was gaining at the conferences. And so I was really bringing back a lot of value to the company, but I was truly starting to become an expert in this realm of digital media and digital music. And so that was great for me and my career, but it was also great for the company because it was a spot where there was a lot of blind spots and we needed more understanding in that area. And I was able to pay back to the company, something in that realm. Also, it was a great place for me to really grow my network and to really leverage my network for the betterment of myself and the company. So there's a lot of real pluses to doing that. And the next thing you do in that, I just talked about a little bit in conferences, but in general, if you're trying to go be it, well, what value can you bring to the company? I'm going to start with the example I started with earlier. Let's just say that you want to move into, like I said, from marketing to PR, and you offer to take a shot at the first draft of some of the, the press releases that are going to come about with baby bands, right? But you're not really in that department. Well, that's great for the people in that department because you're kind of giving them a leg up. It's great for you because you're going to learn, right? And it brings value to the company. And so, one of the ways that I did this when there was a transition from traditional retail, meaning Walmart and, Best Buy and those kinds of players, all of a sudden there was this entity called online retail. And the way I brought extra value is I told my boss, well, I'm going to tackle everything you need me to do with Walmart and Best Buy and Costco. It's all going to happen. I'm never going to miss a beat. But at home, in my own time, I'm going to spend time on these online retailers. I'm going to learn about it. I'm going to bring back value to the company. And so he was able to come back. He came back after a certain point of time, and that's when he was willing to support on conferences and everything else because I was already bringing extra value to the company. So you also want to have some fun with it, branch out. And if you're not having fun with it, it might be a telltale sign that this area of the business that you want to go into might not be the right fit for you. I'm not saying 100%, but for instance, the example I gave, I was sitting there at night checking out CD Baby, checking out CD Universe, checking out CD Now. I was having fun with it. I was enjoying myself, learning about this, bringing something back to the company, and it was fun. So push yourself and try to really enjoy what you're doing, because you're saying this is where you want to take your career. You should have some fun with it. And then lastly, just engage, really, really push yourself. So I'm going to stop there for a second, and I just want to check in with everybody. The first part of this is figuring out how to stand in your own truth and what really is going to excite you in your career, so that when you start to tackle the branding, that is really meaningful and it really has a lot of resonance and power behind it. Any questions in the first few slides?
Adam, while we wait here on a question, I had one myself. So you've done your self-assessment. You've looked outside and got an assessment. How often do you check in with that outside person and yourself to make sure that you're still on that path to your goal? And then what if setbacks occur, whatever they may be, personal or professional, while you're trying to get to your goal? How do you overcome that? And, how do you stay on that path?
Yeah, well, those are both great questions. So when you think about the assessment, you're going to have both from yourself and the other partner. Might be multiple, by the way, multiple people outside. As long as you have a good trust with them, it could be someone senior to you, but it could actually be someone who's junior to you. It could be a colleague. It could be outside the industry. It could be a friend or like a family member. Maybe you're very close with a certain aunt or uncle, and that person, you want to share this with. So I just want to say it could be more than one person, but then you sort of, you synthesize the assessment that you have and the outside assessments that you get. And then you kind of look at what are the things that you need to put under your belt, right? So that you can move this ball forward. So what I would say is how you check in is I would literally list out the things that I need to improve on to get to that spot. And I would sort of be checking those off, almost like a checklist, right? And using visualization as needed or as wanted, to inspire you to get to the next one. But, as you're checking those things off, then you would move on to the next one. And that kind of keeps you on track for, the things that you need to improve on, or the things that you need to kind of add to your skill set. And regarding setbacks, this is where an outside assessment and that relationship with someone on the outside really kind of helps, because people will naturally check in with you. So for instance, I'll share with my journey as a coach. The reason I became a certified executive coach is a friend came and asked me to coach her, on a business problem she was having inside of her company. And she said, I just know your style as a manager. She never worked for me, by the way. It was kind of cool. She goes, but I know you for like 10 years, and I know your style as a manager. And I just know that, there's something that you do is you kind of coach people to get to the next place. Can you manage this, help me manage through this thing? I said, sure. I did it. I didn't charge her anything. And after that, she came back and she said, you should really do this on a more permanent professional level. This is something you really have a natural ability for. So at that point, I shared with her and I said, you know what? I was really taken by your words. And I said, I'm actually going to join a coaching program. And so what naturally happens is she started checking in with me every, 2 weeks, 8 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever. Hey, I'm just curious. How's that coaching program? Hey, what's going on with that? So when you do the outside assessment, you'll notice that naturally people will kind of keep you on course. And what usually happens, not only for me, but everyone, we're all human, is if you're not making strides towards that thing you told somebody you were going to do, you kind of feel a little bit bad about it, but it does push you a little bit to keep going. So that's one thing that you can do. The other thing is if you're having a hard time and you have setbacks, look at those setbacks and see what are the workarounds. But then also it is a point, like if you're having multiple setbacks and you're starting to feel disenfranchised, it's a good time to kind of check in again with the overall objective, where you're trying to head, and make sure that it still resonates with you. Because if it doesn't, if it's kind of lost its luster and you're finding out a little bit about this area of the business and you're not kind of turned on by it anymore, or not as much as you thought you were, that is a natural place where you're going to slow down. And if you're slowing down, you might need to be real with yourself and say, you know what, I thought I wanted to do this, but this isn't right. I need to look for something else. So you need to do a check-in if you feel like you're hitting too many roadblocks and you're getting setbacks. Does that answer your question, Nicole?
Most definitely. Thank you. And there's no questions in there now, Adam. So I would continue and see if we have some more. And folks, there is a questions box on your screen, and you can type your questions into there for Adam.
Great. So let's go to the second place. Let's assume you find yourself in the right place in the industry and you're really happy about where your career is going and your direction. Now let's talk about branding. So you can see on the screen here, it's the art of aligning what you want people to think about you with what people actually do think about you, and vice versa. And I love that little caveat or addition at the end, I should say. And I'm paraphrasing here because Jay is really talking about branding and what you want people to think about your company. And I thought this was brilliant, so I wanted to make it more about the personal branding and paraphrase a little bit here. So it is super important, but that vice versa part, I wanted to share a personal story about this. For me, when I was very young, I was really into bicycles. I'm talking like, grade school, 10, 11 years old, whatever. And I would take bikes apart. I was really into like rebuilding them, helping friends with that kind of stuff. And so as a course of that, it was just natural. Like kids would say in the neighborhood, oh, I'm not interested in this bike anymore. Do you want to buy it? Do you want to trade it? And there was kind of like, let's say, some small time deal making going on in my neighborhood. And as I was doing this, I'm an outgoing person, fairly good negotiator, I guess, even back then. And so I'm negotiating some things. And at one point, I was working on something with a kid, and there were a bunch of kids like in earshot. And this one kid in earshot said, I wouldn't do anything with him. He's going to take advantage of you, or he's going to rip you off, or whatever word he was using. Or he's going to rip you off, or, it's not worth it. Whatever the sentiment was, basically saying that I was taking advantage of this other kid. And it really upset me. I went home that night, I'm like, wow, this really sucks. Like, these are the people in my neighborhood. These aren't, people I don't care about. These are actually people in my neighborhood and my friends, and this is what they're thinking of me. And I thought to myself, you know what, then anytime I do something with anyone in the neighborhood, I'm going to make sure that the deal, if it's an even Steven deal, I'm going to make sure it leans just slightly to the betterment of the person that I'm doing the deal with, because I don't like this idea that people think I'm taking advantage of them. And so, I before I drove, I still, worked on bikes for another couple of years. And that's what I did. Every time I did a deal, I moved over slightly onto their side of it. I looked at the deal from both sides, and I made sure they were getting a good deal. It might be I'll give them an extra part, or I might, fix their sibling's bike, or I might help them, go to the bike store and look at some different things, or whatever it was. And the language, that sentiment that I just highlighted for you from those couple of kids that were kind of mouthing off, the sentiment changed like 180 degrees after about, it took some time, about a year and a half. They're like, oh yeah, well, no, yeah, Adam does a great job. No, he did something with my brother's bike, and it was really cool. So the point is that you have to tap into what people are already actually do think about you as a brand. And if you're not happy about it, you have to take the steps to make sure that what they're thinking gets realigned into the way that you want your brand to be perceived. And it's super important. People think about the outgoing all the time, but they don't think about the incoming and what people already think about their brand. And that's why I love this, this idea and this concept for branding. So once you've kind of got that, right, then, you want to, that's the goal. You want to align these things. Well, how do you do that? The first thing is really think about, what are the attributes that you stand for? And, there's some here on the screen. These aren't mine per se. These are just different attributes that, I think could or could not be part of somebody's personal branding. And, you want to kind of really think about those. And I would say you want to own about 5 of them that you feel really strongly about, that are meaningful to you. And these could be anything. So there's a couple on the screen here, but I'll throw a few more at you. Maybe that you want to be known as the most strategic person in the room, right? That might be important to you. Or you might want to be thought of as somebody that's really kind of thoughtful and measured, right? That you don't kind of rush to judgment. These might be some of the attributes that you might want to embrace. For me personally, I have a style. You guys can probably hear I have a decent amount of energy, but also in my personal branding as an executive, I have what's called a bias for action. This is actually language that I use with teams that I direct or with partners that I'm in, kind of doing deals with. It's a bias for action. And what that means is I would prefer, to think through a problem to a certain point where I think there's like this tipping point, and then I want to just start doing it. And the reason I do that is because a lot of times where I'm at in my career and what I deliver for companies is I'm looking at the future, things that haven't happened yet, what's going to happen next. And so my belief is very strong that, you can't square root all of that perfectly. And if you wait for every little, possibility of that deal or that, let's say that part of the business to be revealed to you, the moment's going to pass you by, right? And so that's why one of my attributes is bias for action. So what you want to do here is you want to think about and actually write down like 5 things that you stand for, and those would be something that I would keep very handy to remind yourself, are you living up to those attributes that you believe are so important to you as part of your brand? The next part of branding yourself is to really think about where you stand out. So earlier I was talking about my transition from being a salesperson into the digital world, right? When digital was just starting. But there was a couple of transition steps there. And one of them was to move from being the traditional salesperson calling on Walmart and Best Buy to then also being an online retail person. And what I realized after, I mentioned I put in some time in on my own. And what I realized was this was a very unique thing for me because I was working at the time for Warner Music. If you looked at all the salespeople that were at the labels and all the salespeople that were at WIA, right, I was the only salesperson that understood online retail. And so I started to own this difference. And I started to be called on, by product development, the head of marketing, whatever, when a band was coming through. Hey, Adam, they kind of want to talk a little bit about what's happening at CD Baby and CD Now. And this is before Amazon hit, and do you mind coming into the meeting? Sure. And I became that person, quote unquote, the expert. I wasn't an expert, but compared to everyone else, I was an expert, right? So they were leaning on me, but I started to own this differentiation and I started to incorporate it into who I was. So much so that at a point where I realized that this was something that was valued by the bands, valued by managers, valued by my own team members inside of Atlantic Records, then I went to my boss and I said, you know what? I would like my title to be changed from VP of Sales to VP of Sales and Online Retail. So you can see there what I was doing was taking a step, a very outward bound step to make a statement to people about what was different, how did I stand out, and how was I different. I did that through my title, but there are a lot of different ways that you can do that. But you want to take whatever your key difference is compared to everyone else, and you want to highlight that to the best of your ability. All right, so superpowers, we all have them. And when I say superpowers, I'm really talking about these are things that you do really well and that you do consistently. They may or may not be differentiators. So for instance, there might be other people that do these things really well. That's the difference between, trying to pick a differentiating thing for your brand and picking a superpower. Superpower, it's okay if other people do those same things, but you do them particularly well. And you know that you can deliver on that on a consistent basis. It's not a one-off basis. So when you think about like, for us in our space program in the 70s, where we walked on the moon and then the program continued as a country, we had very consistent, evolution and development. And we kind of continued to move that program along. So I call these a little bit like your walk on the moon moments. Like, what are the things that you can do? For me, it was, as I moved from online into digital, I was somebody that was very adept at customizing programs for retailers, whether that was at the time, Apple and Amazon got into the mix and, whoever else, Spotify, but it might have been Walmart.com. It didn't matter who the player was. I was just very adept at that. So I was aware of that, and I would make sure that people knew that was something I could bring to the mix, and I was sharing that as part of my brand. So you want to think about your superpowers, make sure you really own them, you can do them consistently, and then you want to be vocal about those superpowers and how you can make a difference and how you can help. So the next part is really about your values. And in the last series, we talked about, as a leader, you need to own your values and you need to know what those are, because if you don't, then your team that you're leading is never gonna, they're not gonna understand what the rules are. The values are kind of like, how are we getting this stuff done? What are the kind of rules of the road? Here, it's a little bit different. The values are, they're for you, right? What you stand for. They're not necessarily things you necessarily need to share out, but you definitely need to live by them. And they're slightly different than attributes because they run a little bit deeper. We're in a world where, everybody wants to, it's a beautiful thing, actually. Everybody wants to contribute and do something meaningful for the world, or most people do. And so, you have to figure out in deep down, what are your values, and what are the things that you want to stand for as you're moving through your career that people kind of sense about you, whether or not you're explicit with them about what these values are. For me, it's really simple. First, I want people to see me as someone that creates and builds trust. To me, it's the core of leading a team. We did talk about that in Leadership Foundations, but that is core to me, and it's also core when I do deals, right? Even if the deal is a difficult deal, I want people to know that they can trust that, I'm negotiating from my company's side of it, but they can trust that what I'm saying is true, and that, that I'm looking for the best outcome for both parties. Number two is, cares about me. And, you could say that this is a little bit of a throwback to my experience as I was 10 or 11 years old. It's important to me that other people that I'm dealing with, whether it's a partner against on the other side of the negotiation table, or whether it's somebody that's on my team or somebody that's in my company, that I actually, care about them as a human being, and that I'm not taking advantage of them in any way. And then the last one is committed to excellence. And for me, this one's important because, people want to know, particularly, if they're working with you, that you're rolling up your sleeves and that you're participating. So for me, when I'm think of myself in a management role, and my branding values here, it might be like, as a manager, it's really important to understand how to delegate, right? So there might be, an initiative we're getting done, and maybe there are 10 things that need to be delegated. I might delegate all 10 of those, right, as a leader, because sometimes you need to, but I might say, you know what, on the third part, that committee, let me participate in that, because I want to make sure that you guys are feeling that I'm contributing here, and that I'm not just, sort of sitting on the sidelines, and I'm committed to the excellence that this team stands for. So, I'm putting myself personally in the mix on this, rolling up my sleeves, and I'm going to participate, not just manage in it. So there's two pieces there. One is care about the outcome, and then second is that people see that I'm rolling up my sleeves and participating in. So you want to understand what your values are, and these are something that you should absolutely write down and believe in them, and make sure they're coming through in whatever way that your business kind of unfolds. You need to make sure that your values are really coming through. So the next is to look and feel the part, and I thought I would use a really interesting example here. If you look at Mark Zuckerberg in his early days, and I just was watching on CNN, there's a series about the 2000s. I was just watching last night this one about the basically the early to mid 2000s, and they're talking about Facebook, and there's Zuckerberg drinking a beer in his interview that he's having with, I forget which network, but a major network, and he's drinking a beer and he's kind of like goofing off a bit. And even if you look at this picture here, he allowed this picture, or his PR team allowed this picture to go out. It's kind of a mess on the left, right? So it leaves a certain impression about Mark Zuckerberg. And then you fast forward a little bit. This is probably from F8 a couple of years ago. You could see he's still very casual, but he's in a little bit better shape, but also he looks a little bit more kind of poised. And he's really starting to look and feel the part of a CEO of a major public company, and he's starting to own that. And then lastly, this is Mark Zuckerberg in front of Congress. And, I did a lot of reading about this because it was interesting to me, not only as a digital guy, but as a coach. And Mark Zuckerberg prepared so well for what was going to happen in his statements to Congress. And he also upped his game a little bit in terms of his image. And what happened is that the Congress, a lot of congressmen and women didn't prepare as well as Mark Zuckerberg did. So this was a very important moment for his company, and Mark was able to really sort of transcend this casual aspect to his leadership, which he still has, but he was able to kind of play the part that he needed to play and look and feel the part of the CEO, not necessarily the leader inside of Facebook. I'm sure he still walks around with a hoodie, but he had to really change and make sure that this part of his brand was correct. So there are other things besides just the way you look and what you dress, particularly in the music business. We're all very casual, right? I'm wearing jeans today. My shirt's not tucked in. That's the music business, right? But there are still other things and other ways that you can do it. Those things include, the language that you use. So it's verbal cues, but also nonverbal cues. So, how you, what you do with your phone when you're sitting in a meeting, that may or may not be part of your brand. Like maybe you want people to see that you're, kind of like always on the go and everything's handled in every 2 seconds, or maybe you don't. You need to think about that, because if you're sitting at a lunch and you're looking at your phone every 2 minutes, the person on the other side of the lunch meeting is taking that into account, whether you know it or not. So you better realize that that's part of your brand. And, is that how you want to be portrayed? Maybe, maybe not. It could be that you're trying to, I don't know, you're an A&R, you're trying to sign a band, and another band calls and you want to pick that up because you want the other band to see that you're connected to other bands. That might be an appropriate place, where grabbing your phone makes a difference because it's part of the brand that you're trying to outline. So you need to think about these things, verbal, nonverbal. And then there are other things that are sort of like environmental or outside of nonverbal, and sort of clothes and dress. And those things are kind of environmental. So for instance, your office. So for me, my office, I'm in the music business. I have a plaque up here, and I've got this big kind of poster with a lot of my ticket stubs in there. And I've got some goofy things, merchandise stuff for the bands I love and whatever. But when you walk in my office, yeah, you see all these fun things, but I actually get a lot of remarks. People walk in my office and like, damn, like, oh, your office is really well put together. Like, meaning like, not so much the stuff I have around, but just that it's kind of like, it kind of feels like it's uncluttered and it's pretty neat. I have a couple of papers on my desk, but I don't have like reams of paper on my desks and, papers that I was supposed to look at, 6 weeks ago that are sitting on a chair and I have to move them when people come in. When they come in, they sit down, they're like, and I've gotten a number of comments over the years. And one person asked me, they said, why is your office like, I've never seen an office that's like just ready for like prime time kind of stuff. Why is it like this? And I said, well, it's part of my brand. When people come in here, I'm a guy that cuts deals, right, with companies. So I might have at the time, I was calling on partners like Facebook or Amazon or whoever, and I might have a partner come in here and I want them to see something about who I am as an executive and how I manage myself, because when we're in the throes of a deal, I want them to also know subconsciously that this is a guy that kind of gets things done, doesn't mess around, and he's able to move the clutter and the stuff that's not important in what we're getting done for business. He's able to move that aside, move it actually out of the way so it's not a distraction at all, and focus on the things that matter. And that's why my brand, part of my brand is the way my office is set up. So these are the things you should think about. Yes, it is your, what you're wearing and how you come across visually, your hair and other accoutrements or whatever. It is definitely your language. It's your nonverbal skills. And then lastly, it's sort of these environmental things. If you're riding in a car with a partner, well, then your car is part of your brand, and make sure it represents the brand that you want. Okay, well, we talked earlier about go be it, so you're going to go be it. And I want to talk today about one of the brands that had to just go be it, and it's IHOP. Ironically enough, my first job in high school was at an IHOP, but that's not why I chose them. I chose them because IHOP, about a year and a half ago, I guess it was something like that, they started to look at gourmet burgers like Red Robin and what else, The Habit, and all these other chains that were popping up that were doing gourmet burgers. And I guess at some point as a company, they looked and they're like, this is kind of bullshit, because we have burgers that are just as good as everybody else, but nobody ever talks about our burgers, and nobody really recognizes our burgers. Even when they're doing the top best chain burgers and all this other stuff, they always get left out of it. So they decided that, we're going to own this thing, this burger thing, and we're going to change our brand to IHOP. And even look at the branding on this. You look at the red smile. You can even see it's darker, so it looks like ketchup, right? And they took this ownership of their brand to a new level, where they actually changed some of the signs on their restaurants in key markets. and they made a big statement about it in the press. Now, some people kind of, beat them up about it, and they think it's quirky and it doesn't make any sense. You're a pancake company, whatever. But the point is, they made a decision. This is what we're going to do for our brand. We want people to know that we're serious about the burger business. So we're going to change our brand. And they just went and they did it. And I really applaud them for that, because it was a big, big execution physically, but also, from a cultural standpoint inside the company, they had to go be this and they had to go own the brand, and they did it. So use that as your guiding light. When you think about your attributes, when you think about, your values, when you think about all of the things that you want, your look and feel, then you got to go do it, and you just got to own it. I'm going to stop there just for a second. If there are any questions, just let Nicole know. But I promised you guys that I would talk a bit about networking. So I do want to talk about networking, because I think there's some stuff in here that will help you once you build your brand, and once you have kind of your arms around what your brand is. When you look at your network, it's really important to think about two things. And today we're talking about getting to the place you want to be, right, as inside your career, and then how you want people to perceive you when you're doing that thing, right? Those are the two things we're talking about. So in relation to that, with your network, you want to look at two aspects of your network. One is, how deep is the connection that you have with the people in your network? And number two is, how strongly can those people in your network influence either, where you were trying to go in your career, because that was the first part of it, or what you're trying to say as your brand, right? So if you look at this visual, the woman in the pink garment, let's assume it's her network for a moment, the one in the center there. You'll see that this is an exercise you can do, and it doesn't have to be with, actual pictures of people, but you could do that, or you could just write their names or whatever. But the point is that you see some of the circles are smaller and some of the circles are larger. And what you want to do is you want to kind of map out, your network and understand the players that you have and where they sit in relation to your connection with them. How deep of a connection do you have? If you've got somebody's cell phone number, that's probably a deeper connection than if you don't have someone's cell phone number, right? If you've got someone's cell phone number and you actually text them and they text back, well, that's a deeper connection than if you just have their cell phone number. So you want to kind of think about, what is your connection and how deep is it? And then you want to also think about, what is the influence they have? So let's imagine that one of these larger circles for this woman in the center, let's imagine that one of these larger circles is a person that directly relates to what she wants her brand to stand for and what she's trying to get done. Maybe, she's trying to rebrand herself as, somebody that really understands live entertainment and how to leverage that, right? And this is a new area of her business, but it's important to her brand. And maybe one of the larger circles are somebody that works at, a ticketing company, Ticketmaster or something like that, right? So that's how you would kind of visualize it. But then, you want to go a little bit deeper than that. And this is, in addition to visualizing it, you want to think about where your network is. And for most people, they immediately think about LinkedIn. But I'll tell you, I was working with a gentleman who had just lost his job, and he and I were working on moving him to the next opportunity in his career. And he told me that, he only had 12 people on LinkedIn. So he hadn't done a really good job on LinkedIn, and that's where people's heads immediately go. And so that, that's not wrong. I mean, LinkedIn's a very powerful tool, and you should try to leverage that. And if you only have 12, contacts on LinkedIn, you need to work at that, and start building that quickly. But what I challenged him on was, I said, well, where else are your connections? Like, what about your contacts in Outlook? What about, any of the, some of the programs that from conferences that you've been at? So for instance, if you've been, to the Music Business Association, conference, and there's, literature and access, let's say even online, to some of the players that you've been at a conference with, well, that's part of your network. So you got to really think about your network. Think about it holistically. Definitely maximize LinkedIn, but don't feel like you're stuck there. Push yourself to go a little wider than that. And then the next piece is, when you're thinking about this in terms of either the brand you want to be or where you want to go in your career, you want to rank those people based on your connection to them, 1 to 5. Like, what is your connection to them? Just the same examples I gave earlier, but you want to rank those people 1 to 5. And then you want to do the same thing again, rank them again 1 to 5 in terms of their ability to influence what you're trying to get done and what you're trying to change in your career. And then what you're going to do from there is you're going to rank them overall based on the top 2 criteria. So let's just say that 1 is the lowest and 5 is the highest. You're going to take a look at the people that are both 5 and 5, right? And if you don't have any of them, that's fine. You're going to look at the people that are 5 and 3. If that's the best rank you got, you want to take a look at those people, and then you want to build a plan to connect with those people. And you see here, I'm talking about a list of 5 to 15 people that you want to network with this year. If you're building your brand, that is an ongoing thing that never ends. And make no mistake, the things that we talked about on the front end of this, your attributes, your values, your look, your feel, all these other things, this is a chance for you to be building your brand, and to make sure that you're doing that on an ongoing basis. So if you look at your network and who are the people that are important to you to help get that word out, those are the people you want to connect with on a regular basis, and you want to try to work that into what you do. You notice I didn't say 35 people here. Don't be unrealistic in this. We're all busy. We all have too much on our plate. But if you can knock down 5 meetings this year that relate to what you're trying to get done as far as your brand is concerned, you've done a strong service for you and your career. Okay. The last thing is the 20-minute meeting. 20-minute networking meeting. You see that right there. I have the authors on there. I have no skin in the game on this book. I'm just a guy who read it. So it's on Amazon, or you can get it, anywhere else you want to get books. But what's so interesting about this book is that so many of us, and myself included, misread the networking meeting. They think it's a game of trying to stay, get on somebody's calendar, get time with somebody, and try to stay as long as you can in that conversation, as long as it's meaningful. It's exactly 180 degrees wrong. It's got to be 180 degrees. You've got to swing the other way. And the premise of this book is brilliant. It basically says that people don't prep for networking meetings because they feel like, well, I already know that person. So for instance, I know Nicole, right, from Music Business Association. And let's just say that I was looking to do something either with my brand or my next role or whatever, and I'm going to network with Nicole. So I'm going to ask her, let's go to lunch. I'm going to spend an hour and 20 with her. Well, that might be too much for her, right? So the idea of this book is understand your agenda and what you're going to get done in this networking meeting first and foremost, right? Come prepared. Don't just phone it in. Actually have a key plan on why that person sitting across from you, share that with them, right? Share the agenda with them. And it could be, by the way, it's not an agenda of 10 items. It might be, but it might be an agenda of 2 items. These are the 2 things I need to cover with you. Try to keep yourself, tell them it's going to be 20 minutes and try to keep yourself to 20 minutes unless they push the boundaries a little bit, moves into 30 minutes. You don't want to be rude and you don't want to be kind of like, cut things off at the last minute, but you want to be able to kind of manage, you're the one managing the time. So you want to say things like, well, I want to be respectful of your time. We've only got another few minutes left. Here's what I wanted to cover in the last couple of minutes, so that they know that you're at least trying to make it timely in the manner that you said it was going to be. And the premise here, this book was written by recruiters. So if you imagine like anyone who's a recruiter, every friend, every cousin, every aunt, uncle, every parent is sending them people because they think that's a great thing. Oh, you should network with my son's a recruiter. He'll help you network. And they kind of make fun of it in the front of the book. But the point is that they wind up being the experts in networking meetings, and they've seen so many people do it so poorly that they make a good point on how to deliver this. So check out that book. I think it's really powerful. Last thing is now. So now you've got this kind of plan down around your brand, and then you're understanding how best to leverage your network, and then, how best to actually network. The next piece is really then trying to figure out, what's the word of mouth? How are you going to get the word out? So the first one is internal. When you're thinking about your brand, you have to look for the proper ways, the opportune ways to get your brand out inside of your company, because that's one way that it's really important that your brand comes through. And I will say, this is an area that I struggle as a guy that's managed people for a long time, and you can tell I'm passionate about coaching and all this other stuff. I've always been more interested in platforming my people, and I think that's right for a person that's managing. I'm happy about that. But I've had people that work for me that are way better at the internal, word of mouth than I am about their own brand. So I'm thinking specifically, I had a person working for me, and one of the things they would do is we were always on the front end leaning of the business, right? The new stuff that was coming up. One of the things they would always do is they would offer to help senior execs understand mobile, because they were experts in the mobile business, right? And I thought this was brilliant. And so sometimes this person would be in a meeting with somebody that was my boss's boss, right? And I wasn't intimidated by it because I was very comfortable with what I was bringing to the party and what I was doing as a manager. So it was no problem for me. It wasn't any conflict. But what I loved about it actually was I loved that this person was able to think about where their brand was going internally in the company. They were providing a service to people that needed to understand it better to make big strategic decisions. But in the course of providing that service and that value back to the company, their brand presence around mobile became like just incredibly epic inside of our organization. And it just became larger than life. Even so, where it was, around mobile specific. I was the overall digital guy overseeing digital and mobile and whatever. But around mobile specific, it even transcended my own brand because I didn't spend a lot of time on internal word of mouth. So I think there are ways to do this creatively, without having to stand up in the meeting and say, I did this and I said that, I did that, or whatever. Because in the music business, we're more in tune with like, hey, and it's a team effort and all that kind of stuff, because it really is when you're moving an artist from point A to point B. So, it's a much more interesting way to get the internal word of mouth out. So think about the ways that you can do that and do that effectively. The second then, of course, is external. And this is where I do think conferences come in super handy. For me personally, as I mentioned, that it was a real learning experience the first 2 or 3 years of conferences where I was literally a sponge, taking it all in, other than try to meet people and network, I didn't say a word, right? Because I didn't have anything to offer. I was still kind of gathering. But then there comes a point where you can start to find your shots. And I started off by participating in a panel. People would say, well, do you want to participate in this panel? That's a great way to get your brand out there, right? In industry conferences. And then it progressed from there where I would say, well, I'm happy to actually moderate a panel and I'll create the panel. And so you can start to build your brand that way at conferences. Other ways outside of your company are, of course, through other partners. So, if you're dealing with partners, maybe they have, featured partner inside of their monthly newsletter, and you could be featured in that, right? So look for those kinds of opportunities that are outside of your current company that really help your brand to resonate. And then lastly, we did talk about LinkedIn, but more on a social level because it's beyond LinkedIn. When you think about, getting your brand out there, there are a lot of different things. It could be LinkedIn, but it could be a blog. It could be a physical, like physical meetups. There's a site called meetup.com, which helps facilitate meetups from, people that are in the same areas of business together. So there's a lot of different ways that you can, kind of use social interaction to get your brand out there. A couple of quick things are, if you're not at the point where you want to write articles yet, for LinkedIn, well, maybe when you see articles, a very easy step is if, don't be, disingenuous, but if you really did like the article, then like it. Just like it, and it will actually help the LinkedIn algorithm, and people will see, oh, so-and-so liked this article. So that's a way you're making a statement about your brand. If you like that article, you're making some kind of statement about your brand. And then if you feel a little bit, as you get more comfortable, if you want to comment, well, that's a bigger leap, right? It's a bigger, or I shouldn't say leap, it's a bigger step than just liking something. So, you comment on it, and maybe there's a back and forth between the person who wrote the article and yourself. And that's a way that you're kind of getting your brand out there, getting your ideas out there, getting yourself out there, and being kind of recognized for participating. And then lastly, on LinkedIn, you could actually write an article, and that would have a lot of resonance because you're standing up in front of all of LinkedIn and saying, this is what I believe. That's a little scary for some people. So, if that's is kind of intimidating to you, start with some of the other things. And then, as I mentioned, there are things like meetup.com and other, entities, boards, etc., where you can participate and really connect the dots with other people on a social level. So that's word of mouth, and that kind of ends, what we're talking about today. So let me outline for you some of the key things that you need to really think about if you're going to engage. First of all, think about what are the 5 best attributes that are going to describe you. What is it about yourself that's really different that you can own and that you want to own? What are you really good at? So these are the superpowers, What values do you stand for? Right? And then what is my look and feel? How am I going to present this in all the different aspects, verbal, nonverbal, environmental, etc. And then some tools. Let me outline for you a couple of tools that you can use to help get your career and your brand to the right place. First, we talked about this on the last one. This is Ilana's idea, but I loved it, so I wanted to also include it today. The retirement party exercise is really thinking about, when you're retiring and you're, whatever age you think you're going to retire at, and they're throwing you a party, to honor all that you've done. What is it that you want them to say about you? Where is it you want to be? And then when you think about your brand, what language do you want people to use about you when they talk fondly, hopefully fondly, about all that you've done in the industry? So you kind of put yourself out there, way out in the future, and you try to visualize what it is that you are expecting others to think about you, and that helps you to actually walk that road today because you're always thinking about that in the back of your mind. So it's a really helpful tool. The 20-minute networking meeting. So, please do take a look at that. If you plan on building your network and that's a key part of your plan here, you should definitely take a look at that. And then coaching is one that, people don't think about a lot. They think that executive coaching is something that a CEO gets and nobody else gets that. It's not true. Companies spend money on coaching, and sometimes you need to go ask your company if they're willing to spend time with, spend money, and resources on you for having coaching. And if they are, you should take advantage of that. Sometimes companies even have internal coaches, and people don't really know that. And then lastly, your network assessment. So think about your LinkedIn, your Outlook cards and your V cards and whatever. And those are the things that you should work on. So I'm going to pause here for a minute and just see if there are any questions around the branding part. But if you also had questions about the first few slides, you're welcome to throw those into the mix as well.
So Adam, there's a really good question here. It says, as an artist, is there a difference in how you present your brand to potential fans and to industry professionals?
Wow, that's a great question. Well, I would say yes. I would say yes in a way. And this is what I'm going to say. Having been, an exec that gets a chance to meet new artists and upcoming artists and established artists, right, with big names or whatever, I do think from a music standpoint, like you want to present yourself and your art in the most authentic way, because that's the only way you can really be as an artist, right? That's why we all love music and we love this art form. But I think on the business side, they're actually a good example. Is actually Kid Rock. I remember just being really very specific about the things that he wanted to get done and how he was going to get those things done. So I think from a business standpoint, I think it's if it's a natural thing for you, or if it's something you want to grow into as an artist, I think that you would want to think slightly different about, what you want to tackle from a business standpoint, and how are you going to present that, while still owning the authenticity of the art that you're going to produce. So, there are a lot of examples, right, in the industry, Jay-Z, whoever, that have thought about their business side of the, the equation. And I do think it's a fine line, but I think you want to think about that, and you want to kind of own that brand in a slightly different way, depending on what your goals are and what you're trying to achieve from a business standpoint. So if you're starting to all of a sudden wake up to or kind of dream about where you want the business side of your art to go, then those might be different objectives than what you're achieving creatively. And so that you would do the same exercise, but you would fashion it to the business objectives that you want to get to.
Great answer. And I think this question, we'll leave on this question because it's a fun one. Julie feels like you left her hanging a little while ago when you were talking about your office and the stuff you have sitting around your office. You said you have things around your office from your favorite band. So Julie asked, please tell us, what are your favorite bands?
Okay, well, one of the things I'm most proud of, this is great. I've worked at Atlantic Records. We put out the BBC sessions, so I have a Led Zeppelin BBC sessions plaque. It's the only plaque I carry because I want to have all my plaques in here. I thought it would be a little bit, just overdone. But that one in particular resonates with me because I remember being in the backseat of my brother's 1968 Barracuda, listening to Led Zeppelin 2 and Houses of the Holy and Zoso, and so that one means a lot to me. And other artists that I have around, of course, the Beatles is my favorite all-time band, but I have something here from Jet, which I think was a cool band that I worked on, and those are some of the prominent ones. Let me see what else I have here real quick. Yeah, I've got Bruce Springsteen and the East Street Band book out down there, so those are some of the ones I love.
Awesome. Adam, thank you again for all the wonderful information that you presented today. For those of you that want to watch it again or, share it with your colleagues, if you're a Music Biz member, you can log on to the webinar section of musicbiz.org and put in your password and watch the recorded webinar. So thank you all for joining us today. Adam, thank you so much. We look forward to welcoming you back on April 4th.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for participating and letting me share some of these ideas with you. Have a great day.